Good morning.
Morning.
How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Did, the did you watch the Super Bowl last night?
No, I'm not a football fan.
Well, Jasmine, I'm gonna be honest with you. I haven't watched or kept up with professional football since I was in high school. Maybe, yeah, at college I kind of quit losing interest. Uh, and but every once in a while I'd watch the Super Bowl sometimes, just because it's an event. You know what I mean? Or I'd
Yeah.
watch, you know, and I'm not really a Tom Brady fan or a New England fan because of I think they just uh, they they push the boundaries on the rules and they've gotten caught several times for cheating, and it aggravates me because I don't think it's a good example what they're setting and the little slap on the wrist with the NFL. So it's kind of lost interest. But I do recognize the talent that that team has uh, and individual players. Belichick, what an intelligent coach, probably one of the best coaches out there. Tom Brady's probably one of the best quarterbacks ever played the game. He's the only one who's got 5 Super Bowl rings. So I was kind of watching the game, or what I watched of it, mainly because I was rooting for Atlanta to win. They never won one. I always tend to go for the underdog. So I lost my water yesterday, so I was kind of working on water most of the time. Uh, so I missed the first 2 touchdowns that Atlanta made. But anyway, I thought Atlanta was going to win that game, but I knew that it was going to be close. I figured Tom Brady would make a comeback, but I was thinking they may just hold off and win. But I was wrong and went into overtime, and Tom Brady made a phenomenal drive, and he made phenomenal drives in that second half, mainly the fourth quarter and overtime. What talent he and his receivers have, and the talent on the Atlanta Falcons. But anyway, it was a good game. Probably the best one I've ever watched. One of the best ball games I've ever seen. But anyway, that being said and done. So, um, I got up with Evan. He'll be here, should be here Thursday. Be able to start coming Thursday. So you're stuck with me again this week by yourself. I was hoping you would have some relief, and I'm sure you were too. So I haven't had a chance to go over your. Wait, no, I did respond to your ration balancing. You did a good job on that. I assume that was for the 6 to 9 month period, the third stage.
Yeah.
6 months because that's when those requirements were the highest because you might still be milking there at that time. So you did a good job, gave you full credit for that one. So now what you need to do for your summer grazing, I showed you how to do that, right? To find, that the fresh fescue.
Yes.
And you should be able, I should balance that. You should be able to show that cow's getting enough nutrients from 3 to 6 months from the fresh fescue. And then the fourth stage of production you know, uh, you can balance that as well. Uh, and then you're going to have to do your bulls and your weaned calves. And you said you're going to buy replacement heifers or
Yes.
replacement replacements. Is that correct?
Can you repeat that? You were breaking up a little bit.
I'm sorry. So you'll need to do the second stage of production and the fourth stage of production for the cows, and you need to do your bulls and weaned calves. So you got three more to do, and then that one that we did in class, you need to just work it out and show it. Uh, You're going to buy your replacement females, right? You're not going to raise
Yes.
them, or are you going to raise them?
I'm gonna buy them.
Okay. Uh, then you don't have to worry about doing rations for those. So we've covered nutrition pretty good, I think. Do you have any questions regarding that?
No.
Okay. For any of you online students, if you do, call me, okay? Uh, and I tried to make the science apply it to real life situations. Um, so, you know, hopefully, I was successful at that and it kind of makes some sense now um, on how things fit together. Now, the other thing uh, that I wanted to go into today, when did I tell you we'd have that exam? Next week or the week after?
Next week.
Next week. Okay. That's right. It was supposed to have been this week. So we'll do that next week. Thank you for keeping me straight, Jasmine. Uh, I'm kind of in a tizzy right now, or a tailspin, where I've lost my water, and I'm still trying to brainstorm on where my problem is, on why I don't have any water right now. And I think I have a hole in my pipe, one of my pipes. So hopefully I can get that fixed today, because my wife, uh, I'm sure she likes to have water in the house as much as I do. And I'm a firm believer in a happy wife is a happy life. And I love my wife dearly, and I try to make her happy. Uh, I even ironed her work clothes for her this weekend. When I was doing laundry, she was working on some stuff, so I just did the laundry and ironed her clothes and trying to make her life a little bit easier. That shows love right there, ironing somebody else's clothes. I hate to iron my own. But I got a great wife. So I use her for stories a lot and aggravate, tell stories on her and stuff, but I do love her. She's a good woman. So anyway, I've been racking my brain trying to figure out what's going on with my water system and why I don't have water. So uh, I'm getting bits and pieces of it eliminated. So I think I may have figured out what my problem is, and I think I may have a hole in my pipe from one reservoir to the other one. And my water's all leaking out, not getting any. So I got to try to get that fixed today. The joys of life, right?
Yeah.
The country life. I wouldn't have it any other way, though. All right. So today, what I like to talk about, or get it started today, is forages. Now, our big part of our ration for livestock are forages. Cattle eat grass. They can take products like grass, byproducts, uh, and byproduct of the corn, take like corn gluten meal or soybean hulls, uh, soybean meal, they can use these products and a plethora of others. If when you look on that sheet, um, byproducts of stuff we use, and we can feed it to cattle and sheep, and some of that we can feed to horses. Uh, but their main deal is grazing. Okay, they can take grass and plant material that we can't use, and they can use that and convert it to a product that we can use, such as meat, milk. Um, so our rations need to be forage based. Now, I've told you this a couple times. Feed costs can run 70 to 80% of the cost of growing and maintaining an animal. Okay, it's your largest expense. Uh, and pastures provide a feed cost of about 1 to 2 cents, or 0.01 to 0.02 cents. Yeah, 1 to 2 cents per pound of TDN. Um, while hay costs about 4 to 6 cents per pound of energy. Um, so pasture is half the price of hay, right?
Yes.
Now, why do you think hay's a lot more expensive than pasture?
Because you have to cut it and bale it and all that extra
Yeah,
stuff.
that's exactly right. You have to cut it, you have to rake it, probably have to ted it before you rake it if you ted it. But you can get it cut, raked, and baled without tedding. And that's just fluffing up that hay. And then you got to move the bales off. Then you got to take the bales and feed them back out. So, that costs money. Uh, so one one of our single greatest opportunities uh, to lower production costs is improved pasture management. And that's just assuming that genetics and health and marketing and all your other areas of management have been addressed, okay? We're just trying to lower costs. We've got everything else taken care of. We can do that by improving our pastures and improving our pasture management. So one of, our primary goal as a livestock producer is to utilize grazed forage for as many months of the year as possible and minimize the need for stored feed. That makes sense? You agree with that or not?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So, uh, there's a guy, and we talked about him some the other day, Bert Tykert, with his, we were talking about target weight, the target weight theory uh, for heifers being 65% of their mature weight prior to breeding, and then 85% of their mature weight prior to calving. Uh, and I told you that he is challenging that theory by just saying, just grow them out. And those that get bred, breed them, or, expose everything for breeding. Those that get bred early in the breeding season are probably going to be those genetics that you want to keep for your herd. That's going to work well in your management. Sell the rest. He kind of, one of another traditional theory out there about uh, your most economically important trait is reproduction. The reproduction is your most economically important trait. And I've said this 100 times, if I've said it once, uh, throughout the years of teaching. He is challenging that as well. Okay? And he comes in with the theory of how much money are you making per acre of land? Now he understands that, if your cows don't get pregnant, you're not going to have anything to sell and you're going to be out of business. He's not disputing the economic importance of reproduction at all, but he's trying to get you to think in terms of how many pounds of beef am I selling per acre of land? How much money am I making per acre? Like I said, he's very low cost type mentality and a very, very high level of management, but low cost. So he is really, really big with pasture management and getting as much from the pastures as possible. Now, so for further reading on your own, I'd recommend you to read some of his articles in Beef Magazine. They're really good. I love reading them. So with that introduction, let's talk a little bit about our grasses, okay, so that we know what we're dealing with, here in Virginia. Now, Jasmine, I'm sorry, you're the only one here for me to pick on, and I know you're not real familiar with our forages because you don't have a big a strong background in livestock, and that's okay. All right, you're coming in here with a fresh mind, and I can corrupt it and get you thinking my way of thinking instead of somebody else's. Right?
Yep.
Okay, so my way of thinking when it comes to livestock production in Virginia is, the traditional way of thinking is, hey, we're livestock producers. Okay, we raise beef, we raise sheep, we raise goats. I would like for us to kind of change that mindset to say, hey, we're forage producers. And we use livestock to harvest that forage for us to make money. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Do you agree with that or disagree with that? Or you don't have an opinion?
I don't really have an opinion right now.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Okay. I applaud that because you don't know a whole lot, and you're just not taking what I say to be the gospel truth. So that's very commendable. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm back here at my document camera.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So when we think about what grasses and forages are predominant in Virginia, we start thinking about grasses. Do you have any idea what our main grasses are in Virginia or what they are out there and where you live?
No, not really.
Okay. Our predominant grass in Virginia is fescue. Okay. And fescue, it's got good points and it's got some issues. Okay. And I don't care what variety of grass you bring up or mention. Every variety is going to have good points and they're going to have bad points. It's just par for the course. There's not a perfect deal that's going to work well for everything you need. But fescue, it's the prominent grass in Virginia. It's very hardy. It can take a lot of abuse. It grows well in cool weather. It stays green. It's green right now, and we've had a mild winter, and my grass is growing a little bit, believe it or not. Uh, that's one of the great things about fescue. It can handle pretty cold temperatures. It does have some issues with an ergot poisoning or ergot issues. It's a fungus that grows on the plant. It's actually in this, I think it's in the seeds from my understanding. And it can cause some health issues with cattle. One of the things it does is it decreases their resistance to heat. So in the summertime, the cattle are less heat tolerant, and they'll be shaded up a lot more. They'll be standing out in a pond or in a creek instead of out grazing. Another thing that we see with fescue is with horses that are brood mares that are fed fescue hay um, prior to foaling. It can cause that the pregnancy to go on a longer. It can cause the thickened placenta, and it can cause the milk or the mare not to produce milk for the foal. So it can cause some major issues in brood mares. So if you're raising horses and have brood mares, pull those brood mares off of fescue those last 60 days prior to foaling. Put them on a different variety of hay and go from there. But with cattle, we can manage these issues with it. We can go in there and dilute it down with clovers. We can, if possible, depending on your land and the amount of rocks, you can go in there and clip those seed heads off in the summertime, early summer, and keep that in a vegetative growth so those seed heads don't develop, and that will help with that as well. Other issue, real bad issues, most of the issues we see now with cattle in Virginia because of selectivity is, the subclinical ones. The ones, they just don't gain as well on fescue as they do other grasses. The rate of gain is a little bit lower. The heat tolerance is there, the lack of heat, of tolerating the heat. But some of the more extreme cases is the feet can fall off, the hooves can fall off. It's called fescue foot. So, it can range from subclinical to really bad issues with fescue. But, it's what we have, so we need to learn how to manage it. So if we can keep it from seeding out, keep it in a vegetative state, that will help us a lot. We quit feeding it to brood mares or pull our brood mares off fescue about 60 days prior to foaling. We shouldn't have any issues. And the same thing with stallions. Pull the stallions off of fescue prior, about 60 days prior to breeding season. But if you just have trail horses and you're not raising babies or standing studs, you don't have anything to worry about. Okay. Or have geldings, you don't have to worry about it. You'll be okay with them. It's just they're in the reproductive side of things with those horses. But we can also, with the cattle, I keep swapping back and forth, we can plant clovers in that fescue and dilute that down. And during the hot part of the summer, we can move them to a different type forage if we need to as well. So those are just some ways we can deal with it or manage it. Lastly, we can go in there, again, if your land is suitable for it, you can go in there and kill it out and plant something else. But that's very expensive. And whatever type of variety of grass you plant in its place, it's not going to be as hardy as the fescue. You can buy end of fight free fescue, um, and it works good. It's a little bit hardier than other types of grasses, but it's just not as hardy as good old Kentucky 31 fescue. But there are a lot of management options, so don't panic. Just just deal with it, manage it, uh, and then just do what you need to do with it. But there are things you can do. You don't shy from it. It's a good grass. We just need to manage it good. So we have fescue, and you'll probably want to know on the exam some of the negative aspects of fescue, okay, and some of the good parts of it. So the negative aspects for cattle is going to be less heat tolerant, not as good for gaining weight. Fescue foot in horses, retained placentas, thickened placentas, no milk. Uh, I don't know of any issues with sheep and goats with fescue. Now, I could stand corrected, but I've just never seen any issues and haven't read about any issues with it other than the rate of gain. There's other grasses that'll get them to gain weight better than the fescue. But other than that, that's about it. So fescue is our predominant grass, and you have a lot of it out there in your part of the country. Another prominent grass that we have is orchard grass. The locals around here, the old timers, call it dogfoot, but the official name is orchard grass. It's called dogfoot because the seed head, the way the seeds are made, it looks like a dog's foot. The paw, the pads. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's how it's got the nickname dogfoot. So that's pretty prominent down here. It's not as prominent as fescue, but it's a major player in southwestern Virginia. It doesn't handle the heat as well as fescue does, so you probably don't have much of it there in Southside area. But in southwestern Virginia, we have a lot of it. Another grass that we have prominent is bluegrass. Now, bluegrass is a short grass, maybe gets 6 to 8 inches the most, and it's got that bluish tint on it, which is why it's called bluegrass. Kentucky's known as a bluegrass state. You got a lot of bluegrass in Kentucky. This grass is very intolerant to heat, and so you probably don't have a lot of it out in your pastures in south side. It's going to be hard to grow there because it's so much hotter there than it is in southwestern Virginia. You'll see it. A lot of people put bluegrass in their yards, and you'll see it a lot on golf courses. And when it gets hot, it quits growing. But it grows a lot in the spring and fall. Another grass that we have in this area is Timothy. And people mainly use that for hay. It can be kind of fragile and gets killed out in pastures, but you do see it some in pastures. Those are our main grasses that we see. Now you probably don't have much Timothy in your part of the country either. You probably got, from what I saw out there, a heck of a lot of fescue. Though we do have a mixture of other grasses here in southwestern Virginia where it's cooler than where it is in Southside. The other thing that we have that we grow a lot in this part of the country are legumes. Do you know what legumes are?
Aren't they sort of like soybeans and stuff?
Okay, soybean is a legume. You're right. Typically, we don't think of growing soybeans for grazing, um, I'm, but soybeans and beans and peas are legumes. Legumes take nitrogen from the air and put it into the soil. And so the type of legumes you see for forage production, mostly, you'll see red clover in hay fields. You'll see it out in the pastures. White clover. And this is going to be a broad spectrum, okay, because there are a whole lot of different varieties of red clover, or a couple different varieties. White clover, you have Dutch. That's the real short white clover you see in the yard, like in yards. And you'll also see Ladino clover, and that's a white clover, but it's tall. And if you manage your pastures properly, you'll have you can go with the Ladino clover. If you don't manage your pastures well, and they're always eaten down short, you'll see that Dutch clover in there. Another prominent legume that people use a lot for forage production is alfalfa. And mainly we'll see alfalfa in hay fields. You can graze it. And you go out west and people will graze alfalfa, not in, like they'll cut hay, and they'll graze the alfalfa. And maybe like instead of taking the last cutting of hay off, they'll go in there and they'll graze it. Or, they'll graze it in the wintertime or something. But, you can graze it, and there's different varieties of alfalfa, and some of them are a good grazing type variety of alfalfa. The thing with legumes you got to be careful of, especially alfalfa and red clover, these two, if cattle go in there, if you turn them out in a pasture or in a hay field with a lot of alfalfa and red clover, they can get a condition called bloat. And bloat is what happens is the rumen gets really foamy and it expands up with a bunch of gases, and the cow basically suffocates to death. She can't breathe. And so if we're going to graze alfalfa or a whole lot of red clover, we turn them into a fresh pastured red clover and they're not used to it, or it's right after a rain or it's right after a heavy dew, we can run into some issues with bloat. Now, this can be prevented. We can use bloat product called Bloat Guard, which keeps them from bloating. You just got to make sure they eat it. And it'll also happen with sheep and goats as well. Or you can just manage when you graze it, or allow them to eat just a certain amount of it, move them off of it. So, that's preventable. That's not a big deal. It just takes a little bit more management there to prevent bloat. But, if a cow bloats, you got two options. You can run a tube down their throat into the rumen and let that gas expel out. or you can punch a hole in through their side into the rumen, uh, and let that gas go out. You got to get rid of that gas. And don't strike a match because it is flammable. Okay? Uh, it will catch fire. So make sure you're not smoking or striking a lighter or a match to see if it's flammable, because I'm here to tell you it is. It will light up. So um, you can manage bloat, and you can manage this to prevent bloat. But these are our main forages in Virginia for grass, or for not grass. Legumes aren't a grass; they're a legume. But these are our main forages that our cattle eat. Now, the thing with these forages, I guess we get down to the basics here. We can divide forages into different categories. Okay, we can put them into grass. We can put them into legumes, and we can have another category called forbs. Now, we know what grass is, right? We know what legumes are. Forbs it's not a grass and it's not a legume. It's just another plant. And it's a plant that cattle can eat and get nutrients from. Or it could be a plant that's poisonous. But forbs also are part of what cattle graze. So let's take, I'm trying to think of a plant they'll eat. Let's take chicory. They'll eat chicory. It's not a grass. It's not a legume. It's just another plant. We see them eat. I've seen them eat the blossoms or the flowers off of thistles. Have you seen that? We don't want thistles in our pastures. It decreases the amount of grass available to those cows because they won't eat around that thistle. They won't eat the grass around that thistle because they get their nose stuck. But for some reason they'll eat the flowers off that thistle sometimes, especially a horse. They'll pop that flower right off. I'm trying to think of some other plants that we have that cattle will eat. And for some reason, I just can't think of any right now. Sunflowers, that's more out west. But anyway, so you have those three types. Basically, we can put our forages in those three deals: grasses, legumes, and forbs. And forbs are just a plant that's not a grass and it's not a legume, but livestock eat it. Okay. Now, there's all sorts of different types of grasses. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Okay. So, let me ask you some questions. Is wheat a grass?
I think so.
Yeah, wheat is a grass. And, when it's harvested for wheat, they just take the seeds off of it, right? And then what you have left is that dead stem. If you bale it up, it's called straw. Oats, rye, those are all grasses. And we can graze wheat and oats and rye. We can these cereal grains, we can graze them. A lot of times, interesting thing I saw out west, um, they graze wheat pastures quite a bit. Excuse me. Um, they go in there and they plant wheat, and they'll let it grow, get about 4 or 6 inches high or so, and they'll go in there and they'll put calves, stocker calves, or wean calves on that wheat, or even cows. And they'll go in there and they'll let them eat it down and they'll move it off. They'll let it eat it down to a couple inches. And they'll move those cattle off. And then in the spring when it starts growing again, they'll go in there and they'll go in there and they'll graze it again. Let it get up about 4 or 5 inches. They'll go in there and eat it down, pull the cattle off, and then they just leave it alone. They may go back in there and fertilize it, spray it for weeds, but they'll let it grow and mature, and then they'll harvest it for wheat. I thought that was kind of interesting. They'll get 2 grazings and then then the grain crop off of it, and that's pretty common practice for wheat. So, just thought I'd throw that in there. Now, would you consider corn a grass?
Yes.
Yes, too. Now, you graze corn and it doesn't grow back again. Typically, we let the corn mature, and depending on the stage of maturity depending what we're going to do with it depends on what stage of maturity it is when we harvest it, whether we're using it for silage or we're going to use it for corn. So, depending how you want your use of it, depending on when you're going to harvest it, what stage of maturity. But typically we don't think of it as a grazing crop. Now, going back to grasses can be broken apart into 2 categories: cool season grasses and warm season. What do you think the difference is between cool season and warm season grasses?
The time that they grow.
Exactly right. Cool season grasses grow when it's cooler. The grasses that our predominant grasses in Virginia are cool season grasses. These grasses over here that we wrote down, fescue, orchard grass, bluegrass, timothy, they are cool season. We'll see a big growth. We'll see a lot of growth in the springtime. When it gets hot, they quit growing. They go dormant. Or they don't grow as fast. And then in the fall, when it starts cooling down, they start growing again. That's all cool season grasses are. Warm season grasses, they grow when it's hot. And when it's cold or cool, they quit growing. So, can you give me some examples of a cool season grass? Since I just told you some. How about
Fescue.
orchard grass, timothy, bluegrass? Those are all cool season grasses. And they're a predominant forages in Virginia. What about some warm season grass? Wheat. Okay, and if you think about some of our cereal grains, wheat, rye, oats, triticale, triticale, however you say it. Those are also cool season grasses. Wheat, rye, oats, and triticale. Or triticale. Uh, what about warm season grasses? Can you give me some examples of a warm season grass?
Um, would corn be a warm season grass?
Yes. Corn. What else? Can you think of anything else?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Uh, millet is a warm season grass. It's a grain. Sorghum. That's another warm season grass. They harvest it for grain. Um, Sudan grass. That's another warm season grass. Um, it's not native either, or it's not a very. You have to plant it like you did these others. Bermuda grass is warm season. Are you familiar with that?
I don't think so.
It's on golf courses a lot. A lot of the high school football fields are going to it for their football fields. And it turns brown in the fall when they go to play on it because it starts to get cool. Why they're doing that, I don't know. Bermuda grass is pretty popular. Um, Little blue stem, big blue stem, Indian grass. Those are other warm season grasses. Uh, we do have some Indian grass here in Virginia that's native. You don't see it very much. Uh, I've never seen little blue stem, but that doesn't mean it's not here. Uh, and I've been told big blue stem will grow. I've been told it's native. I haven't seen any. Okay. I don't know. I just haven't seen any. Switchgrass is another one. You'll hear that a lot in terms of they're looking at switchgrass as a biofuel. So you'll hear that term a lot. You'll hear that, or it's in the news some as a potential biofuel instead of corn. Um, but those are some warm season grasses. Some of them are native, some of them aren't. The other thing we got to think about too with the grasses are annuals and perennials. And all these grasses uh, can be, that we mentioned here on this list. They're going to fall in the category of annual or perennials. What's the difference between annual and perennial?
Annuals only grow one time and perennials come back every year.
That's right. So, looking at these grasses, there are grains that we can use for grasses like wheat, rye, oats, and triticale. Those are annuals. You'll have to plant them every year. Okay. Uh, Warm season, you'd have to plant corn, millet, sorghum. Those are annuals. Sudan grass will grow back. I think it'll grow back. I'm not real familiar with it. Bermuda grass, little blue stem, big blue stem, Indian grass, switchgrass, those are perennials. Okay. Oh, up here on Forbes, I thought of another Forb. Uh, would be turnips. We don't see that out in the pastures, but you can raise turnips and let cattle eat them. You can graze them. But it's a type of Forb as well. So, if we think about, do you have any questions over anything that we've covered so far? Cool season, warm seasons, grasses, lagoons, Forb.
I can't think of any questions.
Okay. Good. But if you do, don't be afraid to ask. Now, thinking about your cool season and warm season grasses, sometimes if I put things in a graph manner, it kind of helps me understand things a little better. Okay. So, like our cool season grasses, if these are the months of the year down here, say January, February, March, April. That's not the scale, by the way, in case you were wondering. Did you ever see the movie Back to the Future?
No.
Oh, come on now. Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. You got to watch that movie. Anyway, all right, I won't go there since you didn't see it. Now, we take a look at cool season grasses and warm season grasses. We'll see our cool season grasses. I wish I had different colors here. I'll go dashes. I'll go a straight line for cool seasons. We start seeing the growth late March, April, May. Kind of June, it starts to plateau out, starts to decrease. July and August. And then September, October, it kind of starts growing again. Okay? For our cool seasons. Does that make sense to you? See how it?
Yes.
See how it does here. We get a big growth. We get the majority of our plant growth in the spring. And then when it gets hot, those plants go dormant or they slow down their growth rate. And then in the fall, when it starts cooling down, they start growing again. And then depending on the winter time and how cold it is, depends on whether they go dormant or kind of grow a little bit. They're not going to grow a whole lot. They may stay green. Fescue especially will stay green. It'll grow a little bit if it's above 32 degrees. But, that's kind of the growth curve of our cool season grasses. So what are just thinking about it practically, looking at this graph, if you just, with cool season grasses and thinking about stages of production with their cows and their needs, when do you think you know, if we're wanting to save money and maximize our forages, you know, matching up forage production with the cow's needs, so we don't have to feed as much stored feed. When do you think we would be a good time to calve?
In March
Okay, I'm not going
or
to disagree
April.
with that. Harlan Hughes, a big ag economist, he writes for Beef Magazine as well. Uh, he says that his idea is to calve about 4 to 6 weeks, about 6 weeks, he says 6 weeks, before peak milk production. I mean, the calf 6 weeks prior to turnout. Okay? Most people, depending on where you live, and most farmers, as a general rule of thumb, okay? When I say that, I'm saying that with tongue in cheek because every year is different. But generally speaking, most farmers turn out about the middle of May. April 15th, Greta Tax Day is their goal to turn out for cattle, to put them out on grass and quit feeding for the rest of the summer, spring and summer. So that's because we have the cool season grasses and we're getting that big growth, right? You can't always do that. Where I live, my elevation, I can't turn out until about May 1st. It's just the way things are. There's nothing set in concrete. You got to make adjustments every year. So if the general rule of thumb is April the 15th, if we calve March 1st, that's going to be 6 weeks prior to turnout. And that's when that cow's going to hit peak milk production and that grass is growing and it should fill those needs. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. If you didn't want to calve in the spring, in March, what would be another good time of the year to calve?
August.
Okay, because you're
Or
getting ready for
September.
this second regrowth, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, most fall calving herds, it's going to be the end of August, 1st of September when they start calving, just because of the heat. No cow. These old fall calver cows, they've been grazing all summer long without a calf on them. They're pretty fat. And if it's hot and they're pretty fat and out of shape and going through the rigors of calving, they get pretty hot on us. So they'll usually start toward the end of August, 1st of September is when they'll start to calve because the temperature's starting to cool down a little bit. But it's that same theory. And you were right, okay, other than just taking into the account of heat, and that's not an issue. So most of them calve about the first part of September for their fall calving herd to hit that second growth of our cool season grasses. Make sense?
Yes.
Is one right and one's wrong or not? Or is it going to be it depends? If you tell me it depends, I'll say you're right.
It depends.
It depends. There's a lot of good farmers that calve in March. There's a lot of good farmers that calve in September. Some of them calve both. They have their herd split. So it just depends on your situation. I think if you're going to calve in the September, you need to be a little bit better of a forage manager to extend your grazing season out here in October, November, and December to cut, to manage those forages good so you don't have to feed much. stored feed during those highest nutrient requirements of that cow, because you're going to be breeding them back in December, right? So they calve September 1st, you'll breed them December 1st. So, you just need to be a little bit better of a forage manager for that fall calving herd. There's some benefits to both. So not one's right, not one's wrong. It's just what works for you. Okay? There's advantages and disadvantages to both. Now, if we take a look at our warm season grasses, our growth curve for warm seasons, what we see, and I'll use a dotted line for this one. Warm season grasses kind of come in this period here. They start growing depending on where you live and how warm it gets, but they'll start greening up there a little bit in April. May, they take off. By August, they're pretty well done. They've already reached maturity, starting to decline. But September and October, they, once it starts getting cool, they don't grow back. That's kind of what corn does, right?
Yes.
Think of corn as a cool. I kind of think of corn, in my mind with warm season, because all those warm season grasses are going to pattern that corn growth. So taking a look at this graph with the cool season and warm season growth curves, can we do stuff to fill in the gaps of when the grass is not there? Our cool season grasses, the fescue, or let's just say fescue. When it starts to go dormant in the summertime, can we use something else to fill in that gap?
You could feed them hay, I guess.
Yeah, you can feed them hay. What else could you do?
You could feed them grain.
All right, you can feed them. Okay. You could also go part of your pastures in a warm season grass, right? And let them graze during that time frame on warm season grasses. Say like millet or Bermuda grass or little blue stem or not little blue stem. You can, but big blue stem would be better, or Indian grass or switchgrass. You could go a warm season annual where you plant it every year, or you can go just a warm season grass, perennial, right? You could do that, or you could just rotate your pastures around and store up some of that growth for this part of the area. There's a lot of options you can do. Now, so we still have, say, January, February, and March, part of April, that we're going to have to feed, right? That we don't have much growth here. And we probably got November and December is going to be about the same, depending on our forage management abilities, right? A lot of people start feeding in November and feed all the way through the middle of April, right?
Yes.
Okay. There's options we can do to extend this as well. We could come in here and plant wheat or rye or oats in the fall, keep them off of it, and when it gets tall enough and our fescue's gone, or our forages are down, we can come in here and we can graze those cereal grains and extend this out higher, right?
Yes.
Or we could do turnips. A lot of farmers do some farmers do turnips and graze turnips in the fall. Uh, Cereal grains, we can come in, let them grow, graze it, and then pull them off of it, and then hit it in March and April, and then go back to our fescue. There's different things we can do. I'm just trying to open up your mind on how we can use different cool season, warm season, and forbs to fill in these gaps to expand or to extend our grazing season. You understand where I'm coming from?
Yes.
Okay. Now, granted, going in there and planting, planting grasses or a annual crop to be grazed, that's going to cost some money. You've got the equipment cost, you got the seed cost, again, you got fertilized costs. But you don't have to harvest it. You're letting that cow harvest it. That makes sense?
Yes.
So it still may be cheaper than feeding hay. Uh, so it's important to understand how these grasses grow. And it's the other thing it's important to is to realize we can fill gaps with grasses and forbs, with cool season, warm season, and forbs. Okay, we can extend our grazing season using different forages. And I'll try to show you some pictures later or next week or Wednesday of some stuff that we did down in North Carolina on a cattle farm I worked down there on. So I'm just trying to open up your mind to different, different things you can look at to extend your grazing. Now, when we think about forage management, when we turn out, if we have a pasture, okay, and I don't care the shape of it, we just have that pasture. If we just turn out our cattle in that pasture, we put enough cattle in there to keep it ate down. I'm trying to find this, get my numbers right here. Here we go. Here's where it is. Now, all this information is coming from information I have on Blackboard under forage management. And some of this gets in very, very deep. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. But the thing, well, let me go back to this chart here a second. The thing I want you to take from this, understanding the growth patterns of cool season and warm seasons, the other thing I want you to take from it is that there's no single forage that's going to provide adequate year-round grazing. Okay? But you can do complementary combinations of several different forages to get a season-long grazing and to extend that out. So anyway, that's what I wanted you to think of about that. Now, Um, a term I want you to know, or I'm trying to get some. I'm trying to find these numbers. I want to make sure I got my numbers right. Uh, on why we uh, excuse me. I went over this, but I want to make sure I tell you the correct figures with what I'm wanting to tell you. Okay. Um, that's not the one I'm wanting to look at. Um, and I just saw it. All right. One of the things that you see um, with pasture use is people will take a pasture and just throw their cattle in it, right? And they'll leave them in there year round, or they'll leave them in there for a grazing season and they'll bring them back home, right? Do you
Yes,
agree with that or not?
I agree.
Okay. Uh, now, what happens with that is these cattle will go in here and they walk around, they poop and they pee, and they poop and they pee and they walk on that grass. You correct?
Correct.
Now, have you been out in pastures much?
I have some, but not
Okay.
too much.
Do the cattle eat the grass around their feces where they poop?
No,
No,
no.
they don't. Okay. What have you noticed? Uh, what have you noticed in your observations about pastures?
I noticed that some people will like split them up into paddocks where they'll move their cows after a certain period of time.
Okay. What's the purpose of that?
They did it to elongate the grazing season.
Okay. Now, why would that work? What 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 would why does that lengthen the grazing season?
It allows for the grass where the cows aren't at to grow longer, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. Uh, I wish I could find my numbers. All right. I'm just leave numbers out of this. We're just going to talk concepts. All right. So, if you turn out a bunch of cattle in this pasture, they're going to go through and they're going to eat the best of the best, right?
Yes.
They're going to eat that young, tender grass. Uh, they're going to pick out their favorites to eat, and they're going to let the rest be, right? And as that's the young, as their favorites start to grow back, they're going to go back to it again, right? And they'll eventually
Right.
kill it out, correct?
Yes.
Okay, in the meantime, this other stuff is getting pooped on, it's getting trampled, and it's getting wasted because they're not eating it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so by throwing them in one big pasture, you lose a lot of forages. It's wasted. They're not going to eat it. And then you get some of this pasture that's overgrazed, that's just too short, dirt showing, weeds start encroaching because they've killed out the grass, and other parts of the pasture are overgrown and trampled and is not being utilized. You've seen that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the theory behind the paddocks is if we can come in here and say we divide this pasture into halves, all right, we'll keep it simple to begin with. We can put our cattle over here on one half of it and force them, let them eat it down. And then when they eat it down, you know, we can put them over in the other side and we can give this pasture a rest and give this side a little bit of a rest and let those plants, let that good stuff grow back up again, and while they're eating this other side. Now, what's that going to, will that help extend our grazing?
Yes.
Okay, it will. Are they going to start eating, if you're holding them in one half of this pasture, are they going to start eating some of the stuff they wouldn't normally eat?
Yes.
Yeah, they would. You don't get as much, you still get a lot of waste with this system. You're always going to have waste. All right, you're not going to get 100% of your forage utilization. But instead of losing 70% of your forage production in a continuous grazing system with no division, you may be backing that up to maybe losing only 60 or 65. Those were the numbers I'm trying to find, and I couldn't find them. I saw them when I was preparing for class, and now I just can't remember where I left them or where I saw them. But they're on Blackboard there somewhere for you. So all of a sudden now we're increasing. We're forcing them to eat some stuff they don't want to eat. We're giving the other part a chance to recover from being grazed. Can we make it any better?
You could split it into more sections.
Yeah, we can. All right. So if we split it again, we can make them eat this down good, give this a rest, come over here and over here, or however we want to move them. We can move them any way we want. The more paddocks that we have on that pasture, the greater we're going to get with our forage utilization. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, how many times can you divide this up?
It depends on how many cows you have.
Well, it's going to depend on a couple things. You're right. It's going to depend on water because they're going to have water. and you're going to have water in each division. And it depends on how much work you want to do, right?
Right.
Now, you can get it small enough to where you can move these cattle twice a day. You know, you can move them in the mornings, let them graze all day, move them and move them again that night, let them graze. Just give them enough to get them through the next time you move your fence. And you can move it once a day, you can move it twice a day, you can move it every couple hours. That's what you do, the sky's the limit on, okay? The smaller you get it and you get more of that utilization, or the smaller you get it and force them to eat it, the better forage utilization you're going to get. Now, the drawbacks of it, it's a heck of a lot of work. And you got to make sure you got water everywhere. Whether you got a big hose, you got a hose and moving your water tank. More than likely, you're going to be using portable electric fencing. That would be the cheapest route, because you really don't want to go in there and put in permanent fencing with moving them that much. That'd be too cost prohibitive. That'd be impractical. But you could go through there and buy some of that. Do you know what polywire is?
No.
Polywire. Have you ever been to the Southern States or Tractor Supply and looked in the fencing section, and they have that looks like plastic electric fence?
Yes.
Yeah, it's got little metal strands running interwoven in with that plastic. That's what's called polywire, and it's fairly cheap. You can just put up one strand, put you a good charger on it, and it'll hold them in. Okay. That's what you would do. There's some dairies, there's these things called grazing dairies where they calve out their dairy cows in the spring. They milk them through the spring, summer, and fall, and part of the winter. They dry them off about September. And they're great forage producers. They send them out there and graze, and they bring them in and milk them and put them back out on pasture. And a lot of these grazing dairies, they'll give them enough grass to get through the next milking. When they get done with that milking, they put them on they have another paddock set out for them. And then they bring them back in and they move them again. So it's how much work you want to do. But the smaller we get those paddocks, the more we increase that utilization of our forages. And anyway, we're out of time, aren't we? You're packing up to leave me. Get me away from him. He's driving me crazy. Right? I pick on you. You're a very good sport. Okay? I'm not trying to be mean. Like I said, I was hoping that Evan would be back today, but it'll be Thursday. He said he's hoping to get back if everything goes well. And if his life is anything like mine, it ain't going to go that well, and he probably won't be here on Thursday. No offense to you, Evan. Life happens. Just like me losing water. And my wife's like, I need to take a shower. I said, honey, you can't. We ain't got no water. She goes, I got to use the bathroom. I said, hold on a second. So I go out to the ditch, and I scoop me up a bucket full of water and come back in to flush the toilet with.
We always keep gallon jugs of water on our back porch. Like after we finish a milk jug, we fill it up with water in case we ever are out.
Yep.
So we have about 20 jugs of water.
Hey, water is a necessity of life. You don't realize how much you use it for everything until you don't have it. That is a good thing to do. We keep jugs of water around, but not that much. We should. You know, I did buy a 25-gallon barrel just for water storage, but I've never filled it up. Because where am I going to put it? It's sitting down there in my tack room. I should fill it up. And when I think about, well, I wish I had that filled up, but heck, I don't need, it's when I need it. And then it'll just sit there, you know, and get old and stale or whatever. I know you got to put some bleach in it, keep stuff from growing, but just takes up space and it's a pain in the butt until you need it. Then you don't have it. But
Yeah.
you're right. All right, Jasmine, I'll let you go and I'll quit harassing you. I'm going to go home and work on my water.
All right. See you
Hopefully,
tomorrow.
I'll have it going. See you tomorrow.